Defiance. Chapter 1. Jana gripped the controls of her swift shuttlecraft as it hurtled through hyperspace. She was still in shock after Counselor Talia had unexpectedly chosen her for this vital mission. Jana was one of the colony's most talented pilots, but she was also young and inexperienced. Doubt gnawed at her. What if she failed and let everyone down? The streaking starlines of hyperspace helped calm her nerves. Flying always gave Jana a sense of purpose and freedom. She had practically grown up in the cockpit alongside her father, back before. Jana shook her head. She couldn't dwell on the past, not now.
Jana glanced down at the navigational display.
She would soon be exiting hyperspace and entering the interstellar void, a lawless expanse far from the Empire's patrols. It was treacherous to navigate, but also the perfect place to secretly begin her search for allies willing to join New Terra against the looming Imperial invasion. Jana knew Admiral Nero's forces would show no mercy. The Empire sought to crush all resistance and expand its iron grip. New Terra's peaceful colony stood in its way, making it a target. They had ancient alien defense systems, but against the full might of the Imperial fleet, it wouldn't be enough. They needed help, or everything her people had built would be destroyed. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed into a splash of stars as Jana's shuttlecraft emerged into the void. She adjusted course, weaving between the drifting hulks of dead ships and around knots of interstellar dust that blotted out the stars. Up ahead, she could just make out the faint glow of Verdana, her first destination. She had no idea if the reclusive inhabitants would even listen to her plea, let alone return with her to fight. But she had to try. Too much depended on her success. Jana vowed not to let doubt or fear hold her back. She would convince the Verdanans to join her cause, whatever it took. For New Terra's sake, she could not fail. Chapter 2. Counselor Talia gazed out the wide viewport atop New Terra's administration spire. The gas giant Caldor dominated the sky, its swirling orange and white clouds casting an otherworldly glow across the colony. From this height, Talia could see clear to the orchards in the east and sloping communications array in the west. 30 years of tireless work was spread before her. They had terraformed the airless moon, built settlements into its very bedrock, and established a thriving home. But now all they had achieved was at risk. Reports continued to filter in about Imperial forces massing on the frontier. It was only a matter of time before the Galactic Empire set its sights on New Terra. With mineral wealth and fuel sources readily available here, the Empire would seek to strip it all through coercion and tyranny. The peace and freedom Talia's people cherished would be crushed underfoot. She could not allow that to happen. As leader of the governing council, the responsibility fell to her to keep everyone safe. Talia was growing old, though, and New Terra's defenses had not been tested since the colony's early days. They needed reinforcements to bolster their ancient anti-orbital ion cannons and stave off the Imperial invasion. That was why she had chosen Jana for this vital task of seeking allies from distant worlds. Talia knew how skilled a pilot she was, having watched the girl grow up alongside her father in the colony's fighter squadrons. Jana had natural talent and daring far beyond her years. Now they would need that courage and resolve to convince others to join their desperate cause. A flickering light on the display behind Talia signaled an incoming transmission from the perimeter watchtowers. More Imperial scout ships had been spotted patrolling the system's outskirts. Their time was running short. She hoped Jana hurried back soon with reinforcements in tow. Talia had done all she could to prepare and protect her people. But against the full fury of the Empire, her defenses and willpower alone would not be enough. They needed allies. Everything now depended on Jana succeeding. Chapter 3. Wind howled outside the rocky cavern sheltering Jana's shuttle as she huddled by its thrusters seeking warmth. She had crash-landed here after narrowly escaping an Imperial fighter patrol. Her ship's reactor was damaged and unable to power the engines or internal heating. Jana knew she was lucky to be alive. The Imperials were clearly growing wise to her quest for allies. But Jana refused to give up. She had to keep going for the sake of everyone back home. Proving herself on this mission was her own heartfelt desire as well. Ever since her father's death on a risky deep space scouting flight, Jana had struggled with a sense of guilt and inadequacy. As his only child, she'd felt responsible for carrying on his legacy as a great pilot. But no matter how skilled she became, doubts plagued her over whether she could live up to his example. Now was her chance to finally prove she could be as brave and resourceful as him when it mattered most. By succeeding here when New Terra needed her, Jana hoped to restore the family honor she felt had been lost. She could do it. She knew she could. Jana hadn't trained her whole life as a pilot just to fail on her first true mission. The Verdonans hadn't accepted her plea yet, but their honored warrior clans remained her best hope for recruits willing to fight. She would make repairs and persuade them, whatever it took. But Jana worried time was running short. What if Admiral Nero's invasion came before she could return with reinforcements? All those families back home, mothers, children, elders, would be defenseless. The thought of anything tragic happening filled Jana with dread. She couldn't let fear delay her, though. Holding her palms near the shuttle's warm vents, Jana made up her mind. No matter the danger or doubts, she had to push forward. Only by success here could she restore her family legacy and save her people. She would make her father proud and fulfill her mission, no matter what the Empire threw at her. Chapter 4. Inside the hollowed-out asteroid station, Corvus listened closely as the transceiver crackled again. He leaned back, stroking his close-cropped beard pensively as footsteps echoed down the corridor behind him. "Well, what's the word?" growled Calder in his gravelly voice. The Calypso leader wore an eye patch and had a cybernetic claw where his left hand should be. His band of mercenaries kept their battle-worn fighter ships docked here in the asteroids, ever ready for their next contract. "Our young friend Jana ran into some trouble with Imperial patrols," Corvus replied. "But she's resourceful. I suspect she'll still reach Verdana before long." Calder slammed his claw down on the table. "You said spying on her would help us get revenge and riches, but this wild bantha chase has yielded nothing." Corvus held up a hand reassuringly. "Patience, my hot-blooded friend. The riches will come, but we have larger concerns at the moment. This invasion the Empire is planning affects us all." He stood and activated a galactic map, highlighting the Calypso system. When the Empire sets its sights on New Terra, it won't be long before Calypso is next, and I know you and your band wish to maintain independence. Calder crossed his arms gruffly. "So, what do you suggest?" "We must aid the colonists if covertly. I have connections on Verdana that can help persuade their warriors to join Jana's cause. In return, you pledge your ships to her, defending New Terra while also protecting your own world." Calder considered, then nodded. "Very well, we have a deal, but you better deliver those Verdanan allies as promised. I look forward to paying back these Imperial scum for their tyranny." Corvus smiled. Excellent. Together with Jana's piloting skills, we shall teach the Empire a lesson about probing too deep into the void. This was only the beginning. Once they rebuffed the invasion, Corvus would be one step closer to his true goal, tracking down the notorious Admiral Nero himself. He suspected Jana's path might soon provide the opportunity for vengeance he had long awaited. Chapter 5. Admiral Nero stood imperiously on the bridge of his dreadnought warship, gazing out the viewport. Before him hung the planet-sized Ecumenopolis Imperial Prime, heart of the galactic empire. Skyscrapers pierced the clouds, mile-high monuments to the Emperor's glory. Nero had been summoned here to receive new orders, but he lingered, appreciating the view. As a young officer, he had fought tooth and nail for promotion until attaining command of the Conquest-class Dreadnought Annihilator. Now, entire systems trembled at the mere mention of his name. "Admiral, the Emperor awaits you," came the nervous voice of a junior officer stationed near the turbolift. "Indeed, we mustn't keep His Eminence waiting," Nero replied. He was one of the few with the privilege of a direct audience with the Emperor. The prospect excited him. Nero knew greater glory awaited. The soaring pillars of the Imperial Palace loomed larger as Nero's shuttle approached. Inside the massive throne room, elite guards stood vigil around the dais, where the Emperor sat shrouded in a black cloak. Nero knelt before the throne. "You summoned me, Your Grace?" The Emperor's voice echoed around the cavernous hall. "The core systems remain restive. I need a decisive victory on the Outer Rim to remind them of Imperial might. You will mobilize the Fourth Fleet for an invasion of the new Terra system." "It shall be done, my lord." Nero's heartbeat quickened at the prospect. The Emperor leaned closer. "Burn their cities. Show no mercy. Make examples of these insurgents." Nero nodded. With the Annihilator leading his battle group, the planet's defenses would crumble in hours. "I will lay waste to all who oppose your will." The Emperor waved a dismissive hand. "Then go and remind the galaxy to fear the Empire." Nero rose and turned sharply on his heel, cloak flourishing behind him. Back aboard the Annihilator, he gazed out the bridge viewport at the might of the Fourth Fleet arrayed before him. At his order, they jumped to lightspeed. Nero yearned for the attack to commence. After this crushing invasion, his name would be legendary. Chapter 6. Jana guided the shuttle down towards a rocky clearing between Verdana's towering forest trees. She knew a settlement lay somewhere nearby, if she could just make peaceful contact. Jana had studied their culture's protocols. She would land unarmed and approach with open palms raised. Hopefully that would convince the warriors she came in good faith, seeking their aid rather than conflict. A rustling in the underbrush put Jana on alert. She lowered the ramp and exited cautiously. Strange bird calls echoed around her, and was that energy weapon fire? Before she could react, two tall figures materialized from the trees, clad in camouflaged armor and brandishing rifles. Verdanan scouts. Jana raised her hands slowly. "I come in peace, seeking your chieftain." Sudden warning klaxons drowned out her words. The scouts glanced up in surprise as a warship soared low overhead, its harsh spotlights cutting through the canopy. Jana's heart sank. That was an Imperial cruiser here already? Nero's fleet must be mobilizing faster than she had anticipated. These weren't local patrols harassing her anymore. The full invasion was imminent. The scouts had opened fire on the cruiser, to little effect. Jana knew any element of surprise was lost. Even if she persuaded the locals now, there was no time to prepare adequate defenses back home. Nero's forces would bombard New Terra relentlessly. Her mission had failed. Unless a daring plan formed in Jana's mind. If the Imperial fleet was still marshaling here on the frontier, she might be able to sneak aboard one of their warships and sabotage it before the attack. It went against her principles, but faced with such tyranny, daring action was needed to give her people any fighting chance. Jana sprinted back to her shuttle, evading stray fire from above. She had to try this bold new plan, or everything she held dear would be lost. Nero had forced her hand, and she would make him pay. As Jana piloted back into the darkness of space, she steeled herself for the vital and dangerous covert mission now ahead. Chapter 7. Koldor's rings shone in the sunlight as Jana's shuttle emerged from hyperspace outside New Terra's orbit. That sight alone filled her with renewed hope. She had completed an impossible mission that might give her people a fighting chance. After infiltrating the Imperial fleet hub at great risk, Jana had managed to sabotage several fighters, plant explosives in a supply depot, and gain valuable intelligence on the timing of Nero's attack. The Empire would still come, but she had bought some precious time. Now came the next daring phase of the plan. Ahead waited the space station outpost where Corvus was gathering his allies. Jana had been suspicious when he first contacted her, given their past encounters. But they now realized Nero posed a mutual threat, and his fearsome band of mercenaries would make powerful reinforcements. Jana requested docking clearance, then headed straight for the asteroid's negotiation chambers. Inside the cavernous hall stood rows of stony-faced mercenaries, clad in mismatched armor and sporting enough weaponry to hold off a small army. At their head was the aged but cunning Calder and Corvus. Jana stepped forward. As you know, the Empire will soon move to destroy New Terra. Stand with us, and you can help save millions of innocents refuse, and you prove yourselves to be thugs and cowards when it counted most. The room was silent for a moment. Then Calder began laughing heartily. Well spoken, Corvus told us of your bravery. We will fight alongside you. The Empire shall learn to fear the void. The mercs cheered and brandished their weapons. Over the din, Jana nodded to Corvus in thanks. They sealed the pact with Calder and prepared the fleet to move out at her signal. Though the odds seemed long, with these hardened fighters at their side, Jana felt hope. The day of battle drew near, but they now had a fighting chance to turn back the Imperial tide. Chapter 8. Nero stood imperiously on the Annihilator's bridge as the New Terra system materialized. Tactical report, he barked. His second-in-command brought up a hologram of the planet and its defenses. A single orbital station and ion cannon emplacements. Sir, fighters have also been detected scrambling. Pathetic, Nero sneered. Helm, bring us within bombardment range. Prepare a full spread of missiles. We will burn their precious forests to ash. Alarms blared. Sir, hyperspace signatures detected. Rebels. Nero watched in surprise as a motley fleet of mercenary warships emerged behind New Terra's moon. How had they managed to assemble reinforcements? No matter, this backwater scum could not hope to challenge Imperial might. Squadrons 2 through 7 intercept those fighters. All frigates target their capital ships, Nero ordered. As the Annihilator glided into position, Nero stood coldly gazing down at the distant blue orb of New Terra. Open fire. A barrage of glowing missiles streaked away, destined to detonate in explosive annihilation within minutes. Nero crossed his arms behind his back, ignoring the battle raging outside. Soon the surface below would be engulfed in glorious flames, marking his crushing victory over these rebels. "Sir, their flagship is closing fast." "What?" Nero watched in disbelief as a converted asteroid hurtled out of the moon's shadow on a direct collision course. It unleashed a withering broadside at point-blank range, hammering the Annihilator's shields right as the missile barrage arrived planetside. Nero gripped the railing for balance. Evasive maneuvers returned fire. He had underestimated these mercenaries. No matter, his fleet still outnumbered them 10-1. Nero would see their insolent flagship destroyed if it was the last thing he did. The Emperor would accept nothing less than total annihilation of these insurgents. Nero swore that before this day was done, the stars themselves would burn in tribute to his feared name. Chapter 9. Jana banked the shuttle sharply, juking clear of missile fire from the Imperial destroyer looming outside. That had been close, but the risks were worth it. Word of a secret Imperial attack on one of Verdana's moons had reached Kaldur's spies. Jana knew she had to intervene immediately. The moon's inhabitants were unarmed scholars and researchers, not militants. If Nero's troops established a base there, it would put the Empire in position to invade the planet next. Jana refused to stand by while more innocent lives were threatened by such tyranny. Weaving between bursts of turbolaser fire, Jana targeted the Imperial landing craft, descending through the moon's wispy atmosphere. After a few daring strafing runs, she had destroyed enough transports to force the remaining dropships to abort their landing sequence and retreat. Jana circled back to confirm the Verdana moon base was now secure again. The researchers transmitted their profound thanks and marveled at her piloting skills. But Jana knew Nero would be back soon with a full invasion force. Returning to New Terra, she was surprised to find Counselor Talia awaiting her in the hangar. "Your bravery continues to be a shining light when darkness closes in," Talia said. Jana blushed at the high praise. "I only did what was needed to help." "And that is precisely what makes you a true leader. You see injustice and act when others would turn away." Talia put a hand on her shoulder. "I chose wisely in trusting you with this mission." Jana had always respected the wise counselor, like the grandmother she'd never known. To hear such words now, it filled her with pride. All her life, she had only wanted to use her skills to protect and inspire her people, like her father before her. His memory still drove her onward through these dark times. She vowed to live up to Talia's high expectations. The Imperials had been halted here today, but Nero's wrath was rising. When he returned, it would be with overwhelming force. Yet Jana knew she could not falter. Too many relied on her for protection now. She would find a way to triumph against all odds. For her people and her principles, she had to keep fighting. Chapter 10. Alarms blared as the Annihilator shook under another barrage. Nero clenched his fist. That accursed mercenary asteroid carrier had them dead to rights. But he would not be defeated here. All batteries opened fire, blow them out of the stars. Nero bellowed. He ignored the explosions tearing through his ship's hull as turbolaser batteries rained destruction on the rocky vessel. His grand invasion reduced to this indignity, hounded by scavengers and thieves. It was intolerable. A fresh alarm tone sounded. Nero rushed to the sensor station. "Report." The officer swallowed nervously. "New hyperspace contact, sir. It's the Verdonans." "What?" Nero watched in dismay as a fleet of timber and rock-hewn warships, encrusted with pulsing crystals, emerged behind the embattled mercenaries. How had these primitives, with their superstitious mysticism, developed hyperspace travel? It mattered not, he would see them wiped out for this insolence. "Scramble all wings, focus fire on those newcomers." Nero had come here to crush a minor colony, not fight a multiplying rabble. Outside, the Verdonan ships glided gracefully between storms of missiles and turbolaser bolts, taking minimal damage. The angular constructs glowed with resonating psychic energy arrays. Nero realized his own crews were being manipulated against him. A frantic shout drew his attention back to the asteroid carrier. Nero's eyes widened in horror. Glowing rifts in space were opening around the rocky vessel, unleashing monstrous behemoths into the battle. "Unlock our beasts under the control of Calypso mercenary beast masters." Nero slammed his fist down. The Emperor himself was watching this debacle from Imperial Prime. Nero had to salvage victory, whatever the cost. Even if it meant destroying this entire worthless system and everyone in it. Chapter 11. Jana banked the shuttle in towards New Terra's primary settlement. Even from high altitude, she could see columns of smoke rising from the suburbs. Nero's opening bombardment had been devastating. As she descended, Jana surveyed the damage with a heavy heart. Scorch marks from incendiary missiles marred the gracefully curving architecture. The Grand Council Hall, where she had stood daydreaming as a child, now lay in ruins. Heading toward the central defense complex, Jana reflected soberly on their situation. Nero's forces may have been held at bay in space for now, thanks to the unexpected arrival of the Verdonans. But many lives had been lost already. And when the Admiral withdrew to regroup, he would return with overwhelming vengeance. Jana landed lightly and made her way inside. Her eyes lit up when she saw Taran emerging from the hangar, still clad in her flight suit. The blonde Calypso mercenary had been training their pilots in preparation for the coming battles. And over their time together, she and Jana had grown ever closer. They embraced tightly. "Your flying was incredible up there," Jana said. "I wish I could have fought at your side." Taran smiled shyly. "We need your skills out here more, but this is far from over." Together, they entered the bustling command center. Kaldor and Counselor Talia stood analyzing troop movements at the central display.
Jana outlined the situation planetside.
Their defense batteries had taken losses, but the farms and much of the population center remained intact for now. Nero's ambitions had been forestalled, yet danger still loomed. They had to prepare swiftly before the next attack came. Jana faced sobering decisions on how best to continue resisting the Empire, with lives hanging in the balance. But she could not let fear or doubt hold her back now. The Imperials would return soon, and their brave alliance had to be ready. Chapter 12. Chaos erupted as the command center's power failed, alarms sounding moments before all went dark. Jana ignited a glow lamp and hurried to find the source of the failure along with hurried technicians. Taran stayed close behind, blaster drawn and alert for intruders. Rounding a corner, Jana spotted the conduit junction box, spewing smoke and sparks. Imperial sabotage, they had scout infiltrators on the planet. Furious, she rushed to reconnect circuits and restore the backup power cells. Nero clearly hoped to leave them vulnerable when his next attack came. She wouldn't give him that chance. With main power restored, Jana and Taran raced back to the command center. They arrived to a hive of activity, all screens alive with dire warnings. "There you are," Kaldur cried. "The Emperor dispatched an elite battle group led by the Emperor's pride. Our fleets are being overrun." On the displays, Jana watched in dismay as mercenary vessels winked out one by one under the onslaught. Talia slammed her fist down. "This is it then. Nero has retreated, but only to deliver the killing blow. We must evacuate who we can before." "No," Jana interrupted, jaw set with determination. "We make our stand here." Ignoring their shocked expressions, she opened a channel fleet-wide. "All vessels, this is Jana. I know our fight seems hopeless, but we must regroup. Follow my fighter wing, we will pierce their lines and take out the command ship." Closing the transmission, she turned to Taran, who stood mouth agape but soon nodded fiercely. Hand in hand, they rushed to the hangar and boarded their ships, soaring into space with wings of fighters behind them. Jana knew the odds were impossible, but she would fight to her last breath to protect those counting on them. Failure was not an option. Together, they could still find some way to deliver a crushing reversal the Empire would never forget. Chapter 13. Jana wove her shuttle through storms of energy bolts and missiles, making straight for the Emperor's pride flanked by Taran and mercenary wings. No clever maneuvers, just pure speed and guts. If they could draw the destroyer's fire, the main rebel fleet stood a chance. Swooping low over the dagger-shaped Imperial battleship, Jana targeted sensor arrays and laser turrets, carving a path for the cruiser armada closing behind. But ahead, the mercenary advance had been stopped cold by the destroyer's bombardment. Jana spotted Kaldur's asteroid carrier, venting fuel and fire. Heart pounding, she opened a channel. "Kaldur, get your ship clear. You can't take much more." Only static and garbled shouts replied. Then, to Jana's horror, the converted asteroid exploded in a hail of shrapnel under heavy cannon fire. Kaldur and his crew were gone, just like that. Rage and grief welled up in Jana. How many more had to die before Nero was satisfied? She accelerated to attack speed, juking through the destroyer's withering crossfire. Taran's fighters soon joined her, unleashing a salvo of proton torpedoes at the destroyer's exposed engines before peeling away. Direct hit. Jana cheered, then went cold. Taran's fighter spiraled out of control, venting fuel and smoke before vanishing below in a fireball. "No." Jana cried out, swinging around desperately for any signs of life. But deep down, she knew it was hopeless. In mere seconds, her brave ally, her dear friend, was gone. The grief threatened to overwhelm her. Only grim determination kept Jana's course steady as she swung back into formation, emotion threatening to choke her. The battle still raged, and her people needed her to be strong now. She had to push the pain away and keep fighting. For her lost friends, her family, her home, she couldn't stop. Through tear-filled eyes, Jana watched the mercenaries regroup for another assault. Victory seemed impossible, but she had to try. Too much was at stake. Gripping the controls like a lifeline, Jana steeled herself and flew onward into the storm of battle. Chapter 14. Nero stood imperiously amid the chaos consuming his bridge. The situation remained critical, but he would seize control. "Status report," he bellowed over the din of alarms and shouting crew. His first officer rushed over, uniform scorched. "Sir, our reactor is critical. The fleet has lost over half its ships, the natives continue to resist, and we cannot withstand much more. Nero's face contorted in rage. Cowardice, I did not come this far to be thwarted by these insects. He backhanded the officer contemptuously. I will burn their precious forests down myself if I must. Some may call it madness, obsession even. But Nero knew only unrelenting force could secure a final victory now. Those who spoke of restraint were weak. He would blaze a path across the galaxy to stamp out all defiance or die trying. Striding to the communications console, Nero opened a channel on all frequencies. People of New Terra, this is Admiral Nero. You have my admiration for your determination. Misplaced though it may be, end this fruitless battle now, and I will be merciful, resist further, and see your world burn. He nodded to his weapons officer. Target their settlement, fire on my command. Nero crossed his arms, waiting for a response as chaos continued raging outside. If they forced his hand, so be it. He would give the order without hesitation. The Emperor was expecting victory here, no matter the cost. Defeat was not an option. A transmission suddenly came through from the planet. Nero smiled coldly. At last, you see reason. His eyes widened as Jana appeared on the view screen, expression hardened like steel. The only reason you will get from me and my people is this: we will never submit to tyranny. Nero slammed his fist down in rage. Then you die with the rest, fire at will, destroy them. This upstart had defied him for the last time. If she insisted on crushing defeat, Nero swore to the Emperor he would not hold back until her precious colony was utterly annihilated. Chapter 15. Weaving through the maelstrom surrounding the Emperor's pride, Jana knew their time was running short. The ship's shields had failed, but its guns still blazed, decimating the Allied ships, desperately trying to halt its advance. Too many had died already. She had to end this. Jana activated the comm, hailing the Verdannan flagship. I need cover fire on my attack run. The stoic commander appeared on her screen, concern in his eyes. That destroyer's guns will shred you before you get close. Jana's expression hardened. I don't need to get close. The Verdannan stared at her intensely, then nodded. We shall clear a path, brave one. May the spirits give you strength. Shutting the transmission, Jana accelerated and arced up and around the raging battle, set on a direct course for the Emperor's pride. She switched all power to engines and guns. Let's give them a surprise, Dad, she murmured. The destroyer grew larger ahead, turbolasers angling to intercept. But, true to their word, the Verdannans focused psionic attacks to temporarily disable the huge turrets. Jana's approach clear, she pushed the engines to full throttle. Almost there. Jana's fingers danced across the weapons systems, entering coded commands. The shuttle closed rapidly on the warship, alarms screaming proximity warnings she ignored. A final tap, and the shuttle's automated message launched just as Jana banked away hard. Clear of the destroyer, she spun her shuttle in time to witness the results. For a moment, nothing. Then the Emperor's pride erupted in a series of massive internal explosions from bow to stern, spewing wreckage and bodies into the void. The ship of the vaunted Imperial Guard, gone in an instant. As the stunned Imperial fleet collapsed into disarray, Jana smiled grimly. Audacity had won the day. Now for Nero, she thought, turning her shuttle back towards the final confrontation ahead. Chapter 16. Jana walked resolutely through the wreckage of New Terra's settlements towards the grounded Imperial landing craft holding Nero and his senior officers captive. Everywhere, she saw the cost of victory: mourning faces, crying children, gaping holes where homes used to be. This war had taken so much from them. Good leaders, treasured places, innocent lives. Jana grieved alongside her people, knowing the losses could have been far worse. Halting Nero's invasion here had saved countless other systems from falling to his butchery and hate. She could take solace in that, at least. But now came the hardest question of all: what to do with those responsible. Some counseled execution, but Jana hesitated. Killing Nero in cold blood would make her no better than him. Her principles were what had inspired others to follow her stand against tyranny. She couldn't forsake them, even for a monster like Nero. No, as much as it pained her, the Admiral had to face public trial for his crimes. The galaxy had to see the Imperial war machine could not crush the spirit of free people united in courage and justice. Nero's own crew should know the truth as well. Reaching the battered landing craft, Jana paused before entering the holding area. This man had tried to destroy everything and everyone she held dear. Part of her did want him dead, but she accepted that stooping to hatred would only stain the hard-fought victory today. Nero would answer for his crimes, but her people would not forsake the principles of mercy and freedom they cherished most, even now. Resolved, Jana waved the guards aside and entered to look her former enemy in the eyes one final time. Chapter 17. Nero stood stoically on the Annihilator's ravaged bridge. The once mighty flagship now drifted, overloaded systems sputtering. The battle had not gone as anticipated, but he was not finished yet. Reroute all reserve power to the engines and hyperdrive, Nero commanded. Prepare a collision course. We will take this cursed world out with us as we burn. His bridge officers hesitated only a moment before carrying out his demands. The reactors whined, struggling to channel sufficient energy into the vast engines. Nero only needed enough power to bring them into a terminal descent. Gravity would do the rest. Outside the viewports, he could see the planet turning serenely below, ignorant of its impending annihilation. Nero's eyes narrowed with vicious satisfaction. If he failed to claim this backwater for the Emperor, then he would see it rendered to molten slag. None would deny him. A proximity alarm blared. Nero's gaze shot upward in fury to see a lone shuttle racing into view, closing rapidly. That infernal pilot again. Ignore her, stay on target. Nero clutched his command chair as the deck lurched beneath him. They were committed now to their final suicidal plunge. A glance at the sensor display confirmed their heading, straight for the planet's fault line cracks. At this speed, impact would destabilize the crust and shatter the entire world. The shuttle swung into attack position right ahead of them, minuscule but refusing to veer away. Nero laughed bitterly. Let this fool be the first consumed by the coming inferno. He would not be denied his vengeance. Brace for impact, Nero shouted. An instant later, the viewports flared blinding white. The end had come. Chapter 18. Jana banked her shuttle hard, engines screaming in protest, trying to shield New Terra below from the inbound Imperial dreadnought. But she knew this was a suicide run. At this speed and trajectory, There was no way for either vessel to pull out in time. And if the far larger warship struck the planetary fault lines, the results would be apocalyptic. She had to find some way to halt its suicidal descent, even if it meant ramming the Annihilator head-on. Jana grieved at the thought of taking so many lives in desperation. But with everyone she loved at stake below, she would do whatever it took, even if it meant her own death. A transmission cut through the chaos, Nero sneering as the planet loomed ahead. "Why sacrifice yourself for those who will never know your deed?" Jana responded calmly. "Because I measure life by ability to alleviate suffering in others, not power or glory." Shutting off the transmission, she looked past the dreadnought at the world she was sworn to protect. Its serene beauty defied the Empire's hunger to dominate and destroy. Gazing into the infinite now racing to meet her, Jana felt only purpose. She had been given gifts to save lives and illuminate darkened paths. If her final act did so, she could rest peacefully. Activating emergency systems, Jana triggered the shuttle's override autopilot and began locking down critical systems. If she timed it right, the shuttle could scrape past the dreadnought's hull, just as its reactors failed from the drain. The pulse would force both vessels into emergency mode, thereby halting their fatal descent short of impact. It was the only gambit she had left. Jana took a deep breath and embraced the peace of what had to be. She was the only thing standing between hope and ruin. Either way, she had burned her fire bright. The console flashed red as the overload protocols completed. With a final look at the world she had fought so hard for, Jana whispered goodbye and activated the emergency pulse. Her shuttle systems went dark. Silently, she watched the massive enemy ship lurch and drift away, its own reactors spiking and failing from the power drain. Their deadly momentum arrested, both vessels coasted safely away from the fault zone's destruction. Jana had done it, saved her homeworld, and proven her courage wasn't just empty words. She had found herself in sacrificing all for others. As the dreadnought tumbled back into the void defeated, Jana smiled through joyful tears. Whatever came next, it was enough. Chapter 19. Nero stood stoically amid the Annihilator's darkened bridge. Emergency lights flickered as the crippled warship drifted helplessly. That pilot had outmaneuvered him again, halting his defiant suicidal plunge just short of oblivion. His failure was complete. As the bridge crew muttered nervously, Nero clenched his fists. Part of him still burned to finish what he started. Damn all the consequences. If he could not claim victory here, why should anyone survive? Footsteps echoed behind him. Nero turned to see one of his lieutenants approaching, his usually pristine uniform torn and scorched. "Sir, life support is failing. We must abandon ship. The colonists are transmitting protocols for our surrender." Surrender. The word cut Nero like a razor. "Better we all perish here with honor," he spat. "I will never submit to these cowards." The officer hesitated, then drew himself up resolutely. "With respect, sir, too many have died already today. Our mission was folly from the start. We must stand down, for the crew's sake if not our own." Rage boiled up in Nero at the defiance, but his retort died on his lips. As much as he hated to admit it, the man was right. This battle was lost. Continued struggle would only prolong the slaughter and suffering below. For once in his iron career, the way forward was unclear. Nero turned away, gazing through the cracked viewport at New Terra distant below. The world he had come to conquer had shown greater courage and conviction than he thought possible. They had prevailed when by all reason they should not have. He had claimed to hold honor, yet they had proved more noble when it mattered most. Quietly, humbly even, Nero gave the order signal of surrender. Chapter 20. Warm sunlight shone down on the forest settlement where citizens of many worlds gathered to witness the historic ceremony. Jana stood tall in her formal dress uniform, looking out over the assembled crowd. Days earlier, Nero's forces had formally surrendered and been taken into custody. No further bloodshed was required. Now came the chance for healing and hope. Jana stepped forward to cheers and ignited the pyre at the center of the new memorial park, surrounded by trees and trickling fountains. The fire rose, illuminating a towering obelisk etched with names of the honored fallen. Kaldur, Taren, so many others. Gone, but not forgotten. Jana bowed her head respectfully as robed Verdanan sages sang the ancient rite of remembrance. With the ceremony's conclusion, celebration unfolded. Jana smiled, watching children of many species play together. They gave her hope for a future beyond prejudice and fear. A realm of cooperation their elders were only beginning to build. Jana moved among the crowd, sharing handshakes, hugs, and stories. Though tinged with grief, this long-awaited victory party lifted everyone's spirits. Music and laughter carried late into the night. For those who had sacrificed so much, seeing joy flourishing again was the greatest honor. When Jana finally retreated to her chambers, she found a simple note waiting from Counselor Telia. In dark days you led when others wavered. Your father would be so proud. Jana clutched those words to her heart and wept. All was not yet mended from the war, but with perseverance and compassion, tomorrow could be better than today. That was all anyone could ask. Chapter 21. A warm breeze stirred Jana's hair as she walked the flagstone path to the memorial grove overlooking the settlement. The two moons shone brightly between passing clouds. She came here often these days to reflect and remember. Despite Nero's surrender, there was still much work ahead repairing relations with Imperial holdouts and preventing reprisals. The gun batteries and defense systems also needed upgrading. But Jana had faith they would prevail. What mattered most was tempering strength with wisdom. Kneeling before the memorial stone, Jana traced the familiar names etched there. So much lost, but not in vain. Each remembered life only strengthened her resolve to keep building a realm of peace. Soft footsteps approached. Jana turned to see Counselor Talia's smiling face illuminated in the moonlight. The elder leader spoke first. You carry quite a burden for one so young. I should have aided you more through the dark times. Jana took her weathered hands gently. You taught me what truly matters. I only did as you would have. Talia nodded slowly. Perhaps so, but the future is yours now. Guide them well, through compassion and courage, they will follow. Jana blinked back grateful tears, hugging her mentor close. Then Talia was gone, like mist on the wind. A luminous echo of the wise mentor who had shaped her and so many. Standing, Jana gazed up at the vast sea of stars overhead. Dangers remained, but she did not feel alone. Her people's spirit would light her way, wherever it led. She had faith the memory of those lost would give her strength to carry on. With a deep breath, Jana turned and descended the hill towards home, heart full and mind serene. Darkness yet lurked in the void, but she knew they would face it together. For those counting on her, she would not falter. The light still shone. Chapter 22. Sunlight glinted off the silver wings of the shuttle as it dove and spun gracefully through the sky. At the controls, Jana felt truly free, the rest of the universe falling away. How differently life had seemed on that first fateful flight. Doubting herself, her path unclear. She had come so far since then. Jana smiled, thinking back on the long road. Her communicator chimed as another shuttle moved into formation alongside. Tempest 1, shall we see who the better pilot is today? Came Taran's playfully smug voice. Jana grinned. You're on. Tempest 2, loser, does double cleaning duty. She accelerated, relishing the familiar rush of her craft at full throttle as Taran gave chase through the cloud banks. After a few breathless minutes dancing around each other's wakes, they touched down lightly outside the hangar. Taran threw up her hands theatrically. I yield, you maniac. These old bones can't keep up anymore. Laughing, they headed inside where Calder awaited, tapping his cybernetic claws impatiently. About time you two showed up. The ceremony starts in an hour, and there's still systems checks to run. Jana exchanged a knowing look with Taran. Time and loss had tempered his hard edges. Together they moved efficiently through the pre-flight routine, bantering good-naturedly. Jana treasured these friends she once thought lost. The bonds nurtured in their darkest hour remained strong. As showtime approached, Jana strode onto the packed observation deck and stepped up to the podium. Gazing out at the eager faces, she swelled with purpose. Her confident words came straight from the heart. When we stand united by justice and compassion, no darkness can extinguish our light. Tina Tihurin, together we rise. The crowd roared. Jana turned to lead the procession, doubts long conquered by her faith in themselves. She knew the light would endure. The end.